Welcome back to the main stage. I hope you enjoyed your coffee.
They're the heroes, hey? They could find it and come back.
Yeah, it took half a marathon
to give you some steps. It's really
to find the coffee and to take it back. We're going to talk about jobs because, of course, as we know, jobs are disappearing in the fossil fuel industry, and in an ideal world, they would be replaced by new jobs in the EV world. But that doesn't always go right. Recently, the job market took a hit, also here in Sweden. So the question of this session will be, how can we create jobs, make sure that EVs are creating jobs?
Yeah.
Maybe you have a question
I've got a question
regarding this theme.
I think it's interesting to ask you, because you're the experts in... if you think about job, which sector you think will gain the most new jobs from the e-mobility transition? And we've got some choices. It can be in the battery, it can be in charging, it can be in the assembling of the vehicles, recycling parts. So please, what do you think will gain the most new jobs? And if you're not sure, which is of course a very logical reason, because it is difficult times. And
battery manufacturing.
Battery manufacturing, yeah.
Even though there were some problems there, to say the least.
But I think it is interesting because Europe should be a leader in battery. Disregard of Norfolk, I think we should have a big battery industry. So I would push on battery industry as well. What would you say?
Yeah, so that might be more wishful thinking than actually prediction.
But maybe the next speakers know.
Yeah. I'd like to introduce our colleague, we can call her our colleague, Linda Andrén. She's the director of the Green Transition Initiative, and she will moderate the next session. Give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you so much, both of you. And I'm not only a colleague, I'm also from Gothenburg. This is my hometown. And I was actually born here. So take up the fight. But I'm extra happy to be here because of all of you, because you are the heroes that will transform transportation from combustion engines to exhausting all the greenhouse gases to cleaner solutions. So thank you for all your work. And looking at the question about work, I do think that the work is very, very important. If there is not enough work, and then it's potentially a problem to put food on the table, right? And if you get a big gap and divide, then you get risks and instability. And that is what we see right now in the world economy, I would say. My name is Linda Andrén, and I'm based in Washington, D.C. with this Green Transition Initiative. So I'm at the scene where some of this stuff takes place. I do head up this initiative to matchmake around collaboration and to the adoption of new technologies within the green sectors. And we are based by a collaboration from Swedish agencies. We are supported by the Swedish Innovation Agency, the Swedish Energy Agency, our trade organization, and Embassy of Sweden to the United States. I do think it's a challenge, but I like it. If you want to learn more about GTI, you can find us at gti.sweden.se and on LinkedIn. But now, with no further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome the keynote of this session, Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium. Please join me in welcoming Vincent van Peteghem.
Thanks so much. Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here, ladies and gentlemen, or as Linda says it, dear heroes. Very happy of being here at this conference. And we all know that we stand here today at the cross point, at the crossroad, where sustainability, technological innovation, and economic reality intersect. And as we build a future of cleaner mobility, we simultaneously feel the pressure of economic uncertainty, job losses, bankruptcies, and tensions in traditional industries. The key question is this: how can we ensure that the transition to electric mobility is not only environmentally sound, but also economically and socially responsible. And the shift from combustion engines to electric vehicles is about more than technology. It is a fundamental economic transformation. On one side, a cleaner planet and the achievement of our climate goals. On the other, the new opportunities for thousands of workers, including those formerly active in conventional sectors. And this transition demands foresight, coordination, and a strong commitment from all stakeholders, from governments, from industry leaders, from workers' representatives, and civil society alike. Europe has shown in the past it can adapt to disruptive change. But this moment demands something more. It demands leadership, the courage to choose for the long term, to choose an economy in which sustainability is not the enemy, but the engine of growth. We must be willing to embrace change, not as a threat, but as a chance to redesign our systems for the better. And electric mobility opens doors, not only to innovation and clean air, but also to new industries and new jobs. And if we do this right, we can build in Europe a resilient ecosystem, both technologically and socially. And that resilience will be key in weathering future crises, whether environmental, geopolitical, or economic. And in Belgium, we have chosen a clear approach, investing in people, investing in infrastructure, and investing in vision. And a key building block is the retraining of our workforce. The e-mobility sector demands new skills, battery technology, high-tech manufacturing, data analysis, IT systems, smart mobility. It is our responsibility as government, but also as an industry, to align training programs accordingly, so that we not only support the climate transition, but also offer people a clear perspective. Lifelong learning and inclusive education models will be essential to ensure no one is left behind in this transition. But sustainability goes beyond vehicles alone. It affects our logistics, our cities, our energy systems, and the greening of mobility requires an integrated approach: public policy, private investment, and civic engagement. And Belgium shows this is possible. Charging networks, smart urban development, renewable energy, all key pillars of a new economy. And this ecosystem approach helps us connect mobility with housing, with planning and energy grids, resulting in smarter and more livable cities. And as a minister, I do not only want to set rules, but also to create opportunities. We are investing in charging infrastructure, in training programs, in innovating financing. But also, we need to invest in certainty, because transitions only succeed when there is predictability for businesses, for workers, and for families. Stability fosters confidence, and confidence enables innovation and long-term investment. And that is why we reformed the company car system in Belgium, not to abolish the popular system of company vehicles, which would have been politically unfeasible without a broader tax reform, but to steer it towards zero-emission solutions. Since 2021, we decided to gradually phase out fossil-fueled company cars, starting in 2026. And this is working. By the end of 2024, 65%, almost two-thirds of the newly registered company cars were electric. In just 2 years, the share of electric vehicles in the total company car fleet rose from 2.5% to 24%. These figures show that when policy aligns with market incentives and public awareness, real change is not only possible, it also goes rapidly. And this also translates into lower emissions. The average CO2 output of the vehicle fleet dropped from 120 gram per kilometer in 2022 to 70 gram per kilometer by the end of 2024. And since company cars account for 20% of all traffic emissions in Belgium, this reform makes a major difference. But there is more. But there is more. This transition is creating jobs. Think of the installation and maintenance of charging points. Think of technicians, project managers, technical planners. Think of software developers building systems to monitor energy consumption, optimize charging flows, and manage fleets intelligently. These are not just jobs for the future, these are the jobs for today. And the digitalization of fleet management and the integration of IT with mobility policy are no longer niche trends. They are engines of employment in administration, in IT, and in consulting. And all of this has a ripple effect on SMEs, suppliers, and training centers. In short, e-mobility acts as a catalyst for a broader economic shift. Not just direct employment in charging infrastructure or software development, but also secondary impacts across the supply chain, logistics, and education. This is where innovation and sustainability go hand in hand with job creation. We are witnessing the emergence of a circular economy around mobility, one that integrates technology, environment, and human capital. However, we must not lose sight on one crucial aspect: the affordability of this transition for the wider population. Not everyone drives a company car. Not everyone can easily switch to a new electric vehicle or has access to a private charging point. For them, we must provide affordable alternatives. Second-hand markets, shared mobility, fiscally balanced solutions, and a solid public charging infrastructure. Colleagues, equity must be at the heart of our mobility policies, or we risk undermining the very progress we seek. Because if e-mobility is not only viable for the happy few, we risk losing public support. And without support, there is no sustainable transition. The electrification of the vehicle fleet must be a story of inclusion, of opportunity for all, regardless of income or location. That is why we continue to invest in social corrections, incentives for private citizens, and local projects that bring electric mobility closer to the people. E-mobility must not be a privilege, but a logical and accessible choice for every Belgian and every European. And only then we can turn ambition into reality and strategy into shared progress. And that is also why we must strengthen our strategic autonomy. We must produce batteries here in Europe. We must source critical raw materials sustainably and ethically, preferably within our own borders or through trusted partnerships. The entire life cycle of electric vehicles must align with our standards and our values. In doing so, we can protect our environment, reduce dependencies, and ensure ethical labor practices. And this brings me to the central question of this conference: jobs or sustainability? Can e-mobility deliver both? And my answer is clear and loud: yes. If we make the right choices, we can achieve both. More than that, we must achieve both, because one cannot exist without the other. Sustainable development is not a trade-off, it's a synergy. And that is why we must dare to invest in people, in innovation, in partnerships, not only within Belgium, but across all of Europe. European Union must rise to the occasion. We must not become dependent of China or the United States. Battery technology, production capacity, and research must be anchored here as well. So let us today chart the course for tomorrow. Let us create a model that proves economic prosperity and environmental protection. These are not opposites, but partners, to reinforce or that reinforce each other. The challenge is immense, but so are the rewards, both economically and ecologically. With policy, with determination, with cooperation, we can lay the foundation for a transformation of the mobility sector, one in which every European can thrive and innovation drives a sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for stressing courage, embracing change, and for livable and affordable cities. I think that's really, really important. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you a very knowledgeable panel. And I would like to welcome to the stage Jacek Trusinski, Net Zero Industry within the European Commission, Directorate General for the Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, Lucy Matera, Secretary General of Charge Up Europe, Stefan Fåhraid, CFO at Morrow Batteries, Daniel Nafors, PhD Operations Manager at the Battery Center here in Gothenburg. Please all take a seat. Thank you so much. And before we start, I would also like to encourage all of you to ask questions in the app. And if you see a question you like, you can also upvote it. And we will, hopefully, at the end, also be able to have some Q&A session, and then we will pick the most popular questions. So I will also kind of introduce the panelists throughout the questions. I will further develop into your background and experience. But let's get started with a question to all of you. Is there a perceived conflict between job creation, sustainability in the context of the EV sector, or can they be mutually reinforcing?
Yes, if I'm allowed to start.
Yes.
Of course, there is a perceived conflict, I believe. As with all change, it can be daunting at first, right? We're losing something and we're gaining something else. We just had the sad story of Northvolt. But then we have the happy story, of course, of Stefan being here representing your industry. So I believe that, yes, there might be a perceived conflict. But as the Deputy Prime Minister just informed us, if we take it head on and we work together, I think there's not going to be a problem.
Thank you. And Jacek?
Yes, so I agree. I think sometimes you read in the press that the switch to EVs will lead to fewer jobs because there is less parts, there's less need for maintenance, but it's a very narrow approach and it doesn't look at what the Deputy Prime Minister of Belgium was saying, that there's a whole huge ecosystem that is built around it, AI, and then up the supply chain all the way to mining and refining of critical materials, which we also have to have here in Europe, not only for economic reasons, but also for resilience reasons. And you know, but it's far from given. I think without very robust policy measures, we really risk in Europe to become a mere assembly line for EVs. And with this in mind, I just would like to say 2 words about what the Commission has been doing recently. Together with member states, we have put in place and we are deploying this industrial plan for the automotive sector. And just to quote a few elements from that. First of all, you need investment support, and you need investment support in parallel for the production of cars, production of components and infrastructure. And so we have allocated 500 million euros for super fast charging infrastructure, 3 billion euros for cell manufacturing, battery cell manufacturing, 1 billion Yes, 1 billion for AI. You also need to create demand for EVs, but also for locally made EVs, so made in Europe. This is something we will be doing through car fleets. Again, we heard it already earlier today, through public procurement and through consumer subsidy schemes. And you need to also ensure a level playing field vis-à-vis foreign producers and benefit from their expertise. And so what we will be doing is imposing increasingly conditions on foreign direct investments coming to Europe so that we can learn from them. And last but not least, skills. Of course, we also need to reskill the workforce. We have good experts here who are more qualified to speak about that than I am, but what I can say is that at the Commission level, we are redirecting some of the funds we have for training specifically to direct them at this specific economic sector because of its importance.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, for the question. And first of all, thank you for inviting. It's a pleasure to be here. I think job creation and sustainability, there is no profound conflict. I think they can go hand in hand. They can and they should. I think the electrification of the society is obviously imperative for the climate, but it's also a huge opportunity to build next generation industries, to invest in sectors that are better equipped to deal with our challenges, whether it's growth or supply chain resilience or strategic autonomy. And that's what we actually are also doing at Morrow Batteries. We're an example of that. We are producing battery cells using hydropower and are creating hundreds of highly skilled jobs in southern Norway. So yes, I think sustainability and job creation go hand in hand.
And Lucy?
I think the same, of course. They can go hand in hand. That doesn't mean that you don't have a perceived conflict, but I think those creations are already happening. The EV charging sector, for instance, we have already created 60,000 jobs today in Europe that are expected to grow to close to 200,000 jobs by 2035. So those jobs creations are already happening. Are they visible? Maybe not, but it is already taking place, right? What I think maybe the perceived conflict that you had a question about, maybe about, when you have a factory that is closing down, it gets very emotional, that gets a lot of headlines, whereas, the gradual job creation that you do on a daily basis may be, just flying under the radar, which is why I really like what the Deputy Prime Minister said, right? It's about finding the courage to look at the long term and sticking to, the direction, because the direction is right, even if you have some bumps on the road. And then the counterpart to the question that you ask is, what if we don't transition? Right? What if we do not transition? What is the cost of that, right? And if you take numbers, Bloomberg has shown that registration of ICE cars, that peaked in 2017, and it's been going down since 2017, okay? The only segment that is growing today is the segment of EVs. Okay, so do we want to be missing that? Probably not, all right? Similarly, if you look at market capitalization, what's the market cap of BYD today? $150 billion. And then the closest European one behind Volkswagen, legacy manufacturer, $50 billion, right? So 3 times smaller. So again, you have some clear market signals. It's not just about, the temporary pain, and that is true, and that happens, but also what is the cost of not doing the transition? Do we want to be even further behind than we are today?
I think you are truly a voice of the EV charging infrastructure industry at ChargeUp. And with your experience, both based on that, but also from European political and policy experience, we have seen some bankruptcies and challenges right now. Do you think is that a hurdle, or will that be something we can overcome to create those jobs?
It is a hurdle politically, very much so, especially at the moment. In the sense that we're seeing, some of the political confidence that was there a few years ago that is being, I think, eroded today on the back of, bad news that you're getting from some companies here and there. So it's a constant work of reminding everyone why we are doing this, the benefits that it brings. And again, the benefits are not for one narrow sector. It's much, much broader. It's all of the ripple effects that the Deputy Prime Minister also mentioned. So if you focus on just one single area that is facing challenges today, which is indeed car making, right? But that's just one part of the story. You need to have a much broader lens to understand all the positive benefits, and that's one of the balance we're trying to bring to the policy discussion.
And Stefan, you have a broad experience, both international, both from capital markets and public-private sector. And in energy and maritime industries. With your experience from these different settings, how do you what do you think about this in relation to the job creation?
Well, I think in relation to job creation, I mean, jobs are created when companies invest. And for companies to invest, there must be a clear and predictable demand. No demand, no investment. It's as simple as that. And I think in Europe we have many tools to shape early demand, to motivate for investments. Public procurement, for instance. If we look at in Norway back in 2013, we had the first public tender for an electric ferry, and that was a zero emission requirement. And that tender triggered a wave of innovations across shipyards, battery producers, and system integrators. And it basically shaped the industry. And today we have more than 80 electric ferries in Norway. But I think public procurement alone is not enough. We also need private companies to take the lead, to be an early customer, an early adapter of new technology. That's very important because that helps de-risk, it helps unlock financing, and it helps to scale business. But for private companies then to be motivated for that, we need incentives. And tax incentive, for instance, could be a way of incentivizing big companies to be an earlier adopter of technology. So I think to kind of create jobs here, we need to implement the tools we have, right? Public procurement, taxes, tax breaks, then to create strong market demand that can unlock investments.
So I think already you are addressing the next question, what strategies can be deployed to ensure the sustainable economic growth for e-mobility transition. Do you want to add something more, Stefan, on that?
Yeah, I think on strategy, I think it's important that three factors are playing together. It's clear regulation, it's predictable demand, and it's smart financing. And I think it's important that regulation, it's clear to create a level playing field that creates certainty for the industry and confidence among investors. And I think the battery regulation is a good example of that because it creates clear standards for CO2 emission and circularity. And when it comes to demand, I've already covered that in terms of using our lever to create demand. And on financing, I think Europe has a lot of instruments, but they are often come late and they're complex. I think what we need is more quicker, risk-tolerant tools to help companies scale wisely, step by step, through the valley of death, right, in the pre-commercial phase, because that's where the bottleneck is. So I think these three things need to play together.
Lucy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I agree a lot with what's been said, right? So jobs are created when investments are being made. And what is the right condition for those investments to take place? First of all, policy certainty. That is really, really critical. So we cannot afford to have, deep soul searching about standards, regulation that have already been adopted. Those provided clear market signals on the basis of which charge point operators, who, by the way, invest massively in rolling out infrastructure, while you only have 4% of EVs in the total EU fleet, right? So that has an impact on what your profitability is. You cannot just pull the rug from under their feet, right, and say, well, sorry, we know you made a whole lot of nice EV projection, but now we're going to change the rules of the game in the middle of the game, and you were planning for profitability at a certain point in time. Well, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. You can have investment or you can have policy uncertainty, but you cannot have both, right? So Europe needs to choose where it wants to go. Of course, we think it should stick to the rules. That actually links also to our ability to continue to attract private capital, right? Because of course investors are looking at what's happening, right, and how that could affect the sector. So if you start changing the rules of the game, it's going to get very difficult to do those, private equity deals that have been supporting the EV charging infrastructure sector. So policy predictability critical, in addition to, of course, the fiscal incentives that are usually quite powerful to support the sector in the early stages before you have, good organic activity on the market.
And Jacek, you are the acting head of Unit for Net Zero Industries within European Commission with a long title, Director General for the Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs. Can you help us out here? Can government and industries collaborate to reskill workers transitioning from combustion to EV production and related fields?
Yeah, absolutely they can, and they do. I would just say that what is foremost necessary is those framework conditions that the other speakers talked about. And then, of course, we need to also collaborate specifically on reskilling programs. I can give one example that we have been deploying for 3 years now, which is called European Battery Academy. And what is interesting there is that our partner, EIT InnoEnergy, is really working very closely with the industry and with the research institutes such as Fraunhofer to identify the specific skills gaps across the supply chain, throughout the value chain. And on that basis, we build standard training packages for the different segments of the industry, and then those are deployed through local partners, for example, vocational training institutes in specific regions in Europe. So what is good about that model is that it's based on industry support, and it's also easily scalable, and it has a degree of standardization across the EU while being adapted to local specificities. And why it's important? Because we are a huge market, 450 million of consumers, and we have to really make sure that we use the power of that market if you want to compete with China and the US. And when you look at things like certificates for vocational training, these are still often very local, and there are certain barriers of entry for the workforce when it wants to move from one country to another. So this is a model we can build further on to also facilitate worker movement across the single market.
Stefan, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think the question is should government and private work together to facilitate the transition. I think that's very important. I think to facilitate investment in new industries, we need to make sure that there is a transfer of skills and that can serve in these industries. And I think that's happening already today. I think it's important that governments and industry starts planning together early, right? To figure out which sectors are growing, what are the skills required, and to develop plans then that's related to the kind of regional skill set that is already there. I also think you need to be very focused on practical job training. So you don't necessarily need kind of general courses, practical job training. How do you manufacture batteries? How do you assemble battery systems or EV cars? How do you operate and maintain windmills? I think it needs to be, focused on practical training. And then share the risk, right? Governments need to come with funding and policies, and companies also need to step up. Hire people at apprenticeships and participate in training. And then do you need to kind of have good showcases? And I think, again, Morrow, we have that. We are located in a part of Norway where there has been a lot of process industry, oil and gas industry, a big pool of skilled workers. And we have recruited there, and we have trained them at the factory. And we now have, a large pool of engineers and operators that knows how to run a factory because we invested in the kind of the skill transfer. So I think that's really important to facilitate actually the growth here that we're talking about in the new industries.
And then maybe the transition isn't that large. Maybe you already are familiar with the processes to some extent. Mm-hmm. So I think that's like a comfort to hear as well. Mm-hmm. Lucy, do you want to add as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the, downside of the strong political focus on job destruction, which is also happening in parallel, is it tends to obfuscate the discussion we need to have about the skills that are required for the transition to be successful. And it's a very broad range of skills, right? You don't just need to be, you don't have to, be a graduate from Stanford with a computer degree to be successful in that transition. We're going to need people who install chargers on the ground, right? Electrical installers. So it's a very broad range of skills, technical, untechnical, etc. Back in the days when I started in the sector, I used to ask people, where are you from, etc. And it was, the needs were so broad. I had people telling me, I used to work on a ship, I used to work in a restaurant, etc., etc. It's fine. We can take people from other sectors to be part of the EV charging infrastructure industry, but we also need to have a discussion, not just about the jobs that are disappearing, because that grabs the headlines, but also the skills we need for tomorrow, which again would not just be super high technical skills. It would also be a very broad range of, as I said, more local skills. I have 3 kids. They're too young to ask for career advice to their mom today, but if they ask me, I would say just be, become an electrician. You're going to have a bright future. You're going to have plenty of of work opportunities. It's going to be fine.
Oh, that sounds great. Jessica, going back to you, how can regulatory frameworks be designed to encourage investments in e-mobility and related job creation initiatives?
Yeah, I think we heard a lot about this already. Stable direction of travel. We have it notably with the 2035 target for a ban of the combustion engine. Support for investment. We heard it. Indeed, Europe instruments have been identified as useful, but maybe sometimes slow. And we are trying to learn from programs that have been deployed elsewhere. You heard maybe about the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, this massive program of subsidies where you basically give a direct production support. So, for example, $20 per kilowatt hour of battery production. And, some manufacturers in Europe are saying, we need it to be able to compete with China for, say, 4 or 5 years. And this is something we are looking into. Also, things like venture capital. We have recently transferred from the EU budget to the EIB 200 million euros to allow it to back more risky operations of the venture capital type. And then the other element that we heard also about is creating demand. And increasingly, I think we will be moving towards obligations for, whenever there are, for example, subsidy schemes for consumers to buy EVs, that these are subject to rules like a given percentage of components has to be made in Europe. And in that way, you can call it protectionism, but this is exactly how, this is one of the ingredients of the success of China in this sector, and we have to try to replicate that.
Mm. And I think then maybe also it's a bit of communication, focusing on the good things instead of the other headlines, because it sounds like we already have a lot of good incentives and we have good examples as well. Daniel, you work as an operations manager at the Battery Center here in Gothenburg, and you are in the middle of reskilling talents. What are the most effective training programs? Might it be in Gothenburg? And other initiatives that we need for the workforce development?
Yes, actually, I think we had a few good examples already here with the training and, of course, the European initiatives to create sort of knowledge and spread the knowledge. And what we do at Battery Center Gothenburg is we try to teach everybody, so from preschoolers through high school, through upper secondary, vocational, and universities, also employed people then who are reskilling or upskilling about the battery industry. There are so many things to learn. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. But for example, we have programs for vocational training where they come to us for 2 days, just to learn a little bit more about the electrification and working with batteries. And then we have, for example, if you're going to work in battery cell manufacturing, maybe you need to come to us for 2 to 3 weeks to really learn about the cell structure and all the different parts of the process. But I think we need to ensure that it's incorporated through all levels of education. So battery technology is not something you learn about when you're 25 or 30. You should be already in school because it's a part of the future.
Interesting, and also different types of roles as well, I guess, also outside what you would think as the normal EV value chain, the fire brigades and different...
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be all over, especially considering the growth of EVs that the Prime Minister mentioned in Belgium. Of course, then the fire brigades and everybody around it also needs to be aware. They need to know how to handle it and what is a safe behavior, right?
Yeah. Jacek, do you want to add something more to this? Sorry, looking at Lucy and asking you, sorry for that.
Well, I'm not such an expert of practical skills programs, but I think all these training aspects have to be kind of weaned into broader policy measures. For example, again, looking at China, one of the success factors apparently was the grouping of these industries in industrial clusters. And that's something that enabled very close relationships between OEMs and their suppliers, and also transferring skills between them and communicating on exactly what is needed. And again, this is something we have to try doing in Europe by favoring the creation of such clusters. And you can do it by, for example, creating specific industrial areas where you have ex ante cleared the whole area for permitting, which already cuts maybe 2 years for project developers to come there. You can target specific infrastructure supplied there for electricity and have specific training programs covering those areas. So that's, I think also this clustering, that this is one of the elements we have to invest in Europe.
And Daniel, what are the challenges and opportunities that you see in for the emerging economies in building a robust e-mobility workforce?
I think one of the biggest challenges, but also a huge opportunity, is to invest in it. Of course, it's hard to invest really hard in something and really believe in it and stick to your belief when things go a bit sour, as they naturally will at some point. But one part is you need short-term workforce and knowledge. I mean, Stefan, right now your company is basically starting, right? So you have your few hundred people ready to go, but eventually that's going to grow, and they're going to need to be replacements, and they're going to need to have probably new battery technology and a lot of new knowledge that comes with that. So we need the youth of today and tomorrow to be interested and to take the next steps. Mm-hmm. So all throughout we need the short term, the mid-term, and the long term to really focus on what we believe in. Otherwise, we're in an emerging economy example, maybe fixing something for 5 years and then it's gone, right? So it needs to be sustainable.
So we both need the long-term stability and knowing the direction, but also need to make it like cool to make batteries?
Maybe cool or interesting, or at least key, right?
Stefan?
It is cool to make batteries, actually. So, but on this point, I think we need to look beyond also skills transfer. We need to invest in education, making sure that the schools and the university offer, technical education that supports R&D in this space, right? So that we can have our homegrown engineers and researchers develop technology themselves. So I think that's also a dimension that's very important longer term too. And we see that examples also. The university in southern Norway, there where we are located, they have focused on electrochemical education and much more battery-specific education. And we are cooperating with them on R&D level to kind of give them real-life experience then in the education there. So I think that's also an important area to create long-term workforce that can support the energy transition.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to remind you also to ask questions so that we have some questions for the Q&A. Please use the app and add your questions there. We have then touched upon European area to be investing in building an innovation into the mobility sector, in the battery sector, to be more specific. But can trade unions also play a pivotal role in ensuring a just transition for workers in the mobility sector and advocating for fair labor practices? And in this regards also then maybe adding to the competitiveness of the batteries as such. And this is a bit of a long question, but Daniel, would you like to?
Yes, I'll try not to be too long-winded in the answer then. Yes, of course, they can be pivotal, and I think they are pivotal. We see today that the trade unions, at least in Sweden, I'm guessing it's not too different, at least in Northern Europe, they play a big role in ensuring that the workforce gets their training and gets what they need for tomorrow. And this transition, then, of course, they need to prepare the workforce so that when Stefan needs 500 more people, that they actually have the right skill sets and are ready, so we don't need to look elsewhere to find the right people. So part of it, yes, they need to be pushy and of course drive for it, but then, as I said earlier, it all needs to be together. We need to believe in it and we need to push for it in order for it to work.
And I was also thinking that this might also push for the locally made aspect of the solution that we offer. Stefan, do you want to add something on this from your experience with building a gigafactory in Norway?
And the cooperation with the trade unions and
Yes.
stuff? Well, I think in Norway we have historically had a very good cooperation between the government, the industry, and the trade unions. And I think that has been one of the strengths, actually. Obviously, they represent their respective interests, but there's a positive, cooperation there. We all go towards a common goal. And I think there has been a very good cooperation in building up, the workforce at our factory. The unions have been flexible, and I think it's been a good sparring partner for, creating, the right environment for expanding.
So the mentor question in the beginning of this today was about where we will see the most jobs. So asking you, Stefan, might be a bit biased.
Yeah.
What are the key areas of innovation within the e-mobility ecosystem that have the potential to create the most jobs?
Well, I liked what I saw here.
Yeah, you did.
Right? So that's for sure. I think in the battery innovation is going to drive a lot of jobs. I mean, you have new chemistries, you have more sustainable minerals, you have new technology, right? And this is driving performance and cost reductions, and we expect that to unlock demand from existing and new markets. So I think you will see a lot of new use cases as battery performance increases. I mean, EV, yes, maritime sector, drones, maritime sector, and everything. So I think in that area, I also really agree on this software and system development. That's high-value jobs. It's going to happen a lot there. I also think in recycling, and I think that's important that we see work creation there, because that makes it more sustainable, and it also makes us less dependent on raw materials, which supports resilience in the supply chains, and also actually support our strategic autonomy as such. So I think I would like also to see the recycling being actually higher on the agenda than it was, but I think we will see there as well.
Daniel, do you want to add?
Yes, I think I agree with what you said, Stefan. I think really that recycling in the long term can be a key enabler to having this sort of localized battery production and everything localized, really ideally within Europe. If we can sustain our minerals and the rare earth minerals by reusing them as much as possible and sort of be reliant on ourselves, then I think we can create a lot of jobs and we can be really good for sustainability. But the innovations required for that, of course, is right now a bit further away. I've been to one of these recycling plants where they recycle EV batteries, and it's not the best process yet, but I know many research institutes and industries are looking at how to do this in a better way.
So we have the opportunity to have Q&A. So if you post a question, it might be even the most popular one if you just post it right now, because there are no questions so far. So give it up if you want to. Meanwhile, I will ask you a question, and I will ask all of you to answer it quickly. And we have touched upon this already, but where will we find the people for the transition? If you can just, like, what industry, where will you find the people for the transition? And starting with you.
I think they are all over. Yep. In service lines, my hairdresser, anybody really is a potential in this new workforce. So it's a new opportunity for all, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we are in a tight labor market, so we just have to make sure that we offer high quality, good earnings jobs, and then with higher added value, creation in Europe. So with that, people naturally will go there from sectors where there's less of that, from anywhere really. Yeah.
Yeah, we have found staff in process industry and oil and gas locally in Southern Norway, and that's where we have recruited. When it comes to technical expertise on electrochemical, we have attracted from abroad, but we'll over time also get it from local markets.
Because the EV charging sector is so closely connected to the energy sector, of course, there's a bunch of people who come from that. But I think those needs are also evolving over time. Right? Like a few years ago, charge point operators were very focused on finding people who could find location, negotiate quickly partnership, bid, exploit, expand, etc. Today, you're seeing the needs for the workforce to shift a little bit more towards jobs that could be more strongly focused on finance or cutting costs, etc. So those needs are not stable over time. As the market evolves, so do the skills force need within, at least for our sector.
Yes, thank you all. I see no questions here, so I will try to conclude the session. And I do find it reassuring to learn that you can move from the oil and gas industry into EV production. Sounds like a good transition to do. And that we have a lot of investments and initiatives within the European Union to make it easier and more regulated also to create batteries, and both to make it locally, but also in a sustainable way, and with training facilities in place and emerging, and with a gigafactory in Norway. I do find that that change is not dangerous. It's standing still, that is. And with this transition, new jobs will be created, so there are questions. Then we will have a question more, and I will do a new summary after that. Let's see if we find something else. Related to foreign investments, how can we ensure skills transfer from foreign investors investing in Europe, and what should a skill transfer policy mandate look like? Anybody up for that question?
Well, I think it's a good question. I think if we look at how we have done it, and we have been successful at attracting skilled technical resource from abroad. We are located in southern Norway. It's the best place to live in Norway. It's a beautiful environment. It's sea. It's scenery. It's a great place to be. So I think that's important. There's infrastructure around it, and there is social life, and it's a good communication, everything. So I think, in addition, we have then been successful at integrating or work with their technical resource from abroad and train our local staff then in electrochemical. So I think location is important. I think when you bring family with you to a new country.
If I could just, you can impose certain conditions on foreign direct investments, be they Chinese or Korean or American. The issue today that we see in Europe is that, and we discussed it prior to that panel, that member states are competing between each other for those investments, and they are often ready to accept investments that are not very sustainable long term. They bring in the whole workforce from third countries, the whole machinery from third countries are just assembly lines, and this is something we should avoid and be moving really to a model where we think long term what we need in Europe and impose according conditionalities on those investments. Because we also hear that those companies are in principle ready to accept them, but they will not, of course, make the first step. We have to make it.
Yeah. Lucy, you look like you maybe want to add?
No, because it's a fine balance, right? Like you want to remain a continent that is open to investments, right? And are concerned about, do we need to move towards made in Europe, etc. The question is, do you manage to do that while still keeping, let's say, EV uptake on track, right? When Europe takes a decision to impose tariff on Chinese EVs because they're far ahead and they sell for a very cheap price, What that means for the charge point operators in the membership is that when there's demand that's going to take a hit, right? And so when you start trying to mess around a little bit with some aspect, there's usually ripple effects that haven't necessarily been fully thought through. So as we, walk carefully in that on that path of, choosing between the right foreign investment and those that we like a little bit less, we have to be mindful of what are the broader consequences that the choice will entail, not just on car makers in Europe, because those are center stage, but on the broader industry that is being built around them.
Thank you. And I do think that we actually addressed more than one question or two here, because, for example, attracting talent from the foreign investments, what you answered there, Stefan, was also the nature and to attract people with also other means why you should join and work in Europe. So with this then, I will now try to summarize. And as I started to say, I think that standing still is what is dangerous and that we need to keep moving. We need to have a steady direction and not too much insecurity in that. But I do think that we have that in Europe, and that makes me happy to be from Sweden and to be a European citizen. So let us all continue to pioneer the possible, and thank you all in the panel, Daniel, Jacek, Stefan, and Lucy. Thank you all. Give them a warm hand.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this topic. I think it's so important. So thank you so much for all of your contributions, and look forward to speaking to you in the breaks or whatever. And thank you, Linda, for doing an excellent job.
Yeah.
Hungry?
Time to eat.
What did I eat?
Well, there's been a lot of Sweden promotion already, but I do need to admit that the Swedish lunch culture is far superior to ours. So you don't need to worry about cheese sandwiches. They'll probably serve something warm, because Swedish people have a warm lunch. Here on the West Coast, usually a nice fish, a lot of salt, a lot of butter.
It is salty, eh?
It's very salty.
Yeah, that's what I noticed yesterday.
You need to get used to that, but it's really nice once you get used to it.
Yeah.
So enjoy your lunch.